couple of tips for you. Somebody took like 8 photographs for their apartment or whatever, and it ends up being like 170 megabytes. Just a huge file. Once you made it into a PDF, you can then save it in Acrobat as just do save as other, and then one of the options will be reduced size PDF, and it shrinks it down to like 4 megabytes. If the images haven't been compressed already by whatever your phone or app or whatever, Acrobat can do that. And the second tip is, if you select some things on the screen and hold down Control key and just use the arrow keys, you can just sort of move them around. The farther in you zoom, the finer the increment is. So that's different from moving them so they'll actually like connect corner to corner. They'll just sort of eyeball until they're nearby. But I had forgotten about that, and some little online tutorial showed me. What we're going to deal with today is the idea of viewports, which are like different zoom lenses aimed at the same thing. And then we can just see them next to each other on a plotted sheet at the same time. That'll be pretty much our first exercise today. And then we can control which layers are shown in each of those views, so that you might have a simplified version of it here with just the furniture and no dimensions. And then here you'd actually put the dimensions for the bathroom. So we turn all that stuff on and off. Show things in detail where you need them, but doesn't bother showing them in huge detail where you don't. So if you would, let's just open the Art 559 template. And we'll do a simplified demonstration through the gist of what this is like, and then we'll actually do it with some real files just to see what's going on. So I'm going to quickly draw a 30 by 20 foot rectangle to be the outside of a building. Okay, so there's a 20 by 30 foot rectangle. I'm going to offset these outside walls, let's say a foot. And then draw something inside. And now I'll change the layer color just to make that easier to see on the screen. And fill at the corner. And then move the layer palette over to the right and dock it. And bring up the properties palette and dock it on the left. Okay, so here's a 30 foot by 20 foot rectangular building with some smaller room inside it. And we're going to put both of these onto a title block. First, the whole thing at one scale, and then the smaller one at a large scale so we can see the details. And we do this on the layout. Right now, we've been working in what AutoCAD calls model space, which is where you draw everything. Everything gets drawn here. And then we aim our cameras at different parts of that at different scales to put them up on the display in a layout sheet. So if you go to your layout, the templates I gave you have a 24 by 36 inch layout in them. We don't just drag geometry over there. We set up viewports, initially rectangular, although they can be funny shaped if you want, that contain a given amount of geometry, a given number of layers at a certain scale. So, and that's just a viewport. To make a viewport, we use the mview command. Mview And it's just a click and a click. And Revit will take whatever you've gotten and just scale it to fit there. It doesn't how big you want it to be. So what we do, we have this viewport is a thing. So we can select its edge and then tell it over here in properties. And if you don't have that turned on, the PR command will bring up that window. PR properties. We want to set the standard scale, which is the scale of the objects inside that, to 1/4 inch equals a foot. 1/4 inch equals a foot. Not very big. We can bring the corners of that in to fit more carefully. We can deal with this object in 2 different ways. If we double click outside here into the paperspace,
or type PS,
then we can move this window around like any other
CAD object.
It's just
a drawn object
on a sheet of paper. They can overlap. We can change the scale of them. If you double click inside the viewport,
you can create and modify objects just as if you were back on the model tab. If I zoom while in a model viewport,
now it's no longer 1/4 inch equals a foot anymore. And that's a pain because you zoom all the time. So what you do when you've got it set the way you want it, let's set my standard scale. I have to get out of here. I click out there, double click in the paper to be able to deal with this as a thing. Select it. Let me change this back to 1/4 inch equals a foot. And then to stop it from panning and zooming undesirably, I'm going to lock the display. Over on display locked, I'm going to say yes. So now it's quite convenient. If I'm working in there and accidentally zoom by mistake, it actually takes me back into paper space, zooms in, it takes me back into model space so I can work on it. This window has its own whole set of graphic controls. So with it being active, model space active, I clicked or unclicked the. It's not showing now. It's supposed to be showing now. Oh, I had to click out to make that happen. So now I've got that one at 1/4 inch equals a foot. And I would like to enlarge the bathroom up much larger, let's say to 1 inch equals a foot. Let's say the bathroom is what we're really working on in this project. So I can either make another viewport. Let's do that with MView again. Make view. And I'll make it bigger and put it over here.
Again, we see that AutoCAD has sized everything that we would see on the model tab to fit in this viewport.
I don't set the scale from inside the window. I come back outside and select it and then say I want it to be, let's say 1 inch equal a foot. 1 inch equal a foot. That'll be pretty big.
Now that the scale is set, there are 2 ways to get the geometry we want to fit inside the viewport.
One is to select it and drag its grips until we see what we want to see. In this case, just the kitchen, and then that whole thing can be moved into place. Move that over to there. Or in a viewport that you haven't locked yet, you can double click inside to activate
the model space inside the viewport
and use pan
or dragging with the mouse wheel
to move around as you want. Once you've locked the view, then you can't pan anymore. In that case, you can still stretch it with the grips. So it's got a fixed focal length for the zoom lens in a fixed direction that it's looking. So I'm going to come back outside of here. select this and lock it as well. A couple of attributes of viewports.
Like all AutoCAD entities, each viewport has a layer.
In this case, it's just inherited whatever the current layer was in the drawing. But usually we don't want these edges to plot. If you include those edges, they end up looking like lines. They're looking like a real thing. They get confusing. So we really want to not have them show up when we plot them. So if you remember the two little definition points of a dimension that are actually what that distance is measuring, those are always made, these guys all by themselves, on a layer called the def points, DEFPOINTS, which does not plot. You can't make that plot.
So a common practice
would be, instead of creating a separate
non-plotting layer for viewports, we can select one or more viewports and change their layer.
The layer of the viewport edge itself to def points. And if you don't have it already, that layer is created automatically when the first time you make a dimension in a drawing. So I like to have them light like this, just to know sort of how they overlap and maybe where the edges are. It could be that a piece of text or something is getting cut off just because that's been moved in too far, or the text has been put in afterwards. Just to know where it is, help keep things lined up. Normally we can ignore all these guys. If there's something you don't want to show when you're doing a particular plot, you can turn any individual viewport off with on, no, and just does not display the geometry inside it until you turn it back on again. So the more things we can do here in paperspace, we have the major elements are usually a title block, which really all that needs to be is a rectangle that you draw just to know where you're placing things, so you can tell the plotter, I want to plot this over here, not this over here. But usually there's a title block, your viewports, and then this is the place where you'd put all your notes written in a style that's 1/8 of an inch high or something like that. Text, for instance, actually takes a long time to redraw on the screen. If you had all that text over here somewhere, and then just set up a view, every time we come back to here, it would just take a long time to redraw all that text. So there's just no point doing that. The only place we want to see it would be here in the layout where the text would be happening.
In paperspace, we have to start
dealing with everything at its actual plotted size. So this title block is actually 36 by 24 inches. And that's going to map directly to the 24 by 36 sheet that we're going to be plotting. Title blocks, viewports, document stuff. Most projects will also have a vicinity map.
Something you can screenshot off of Google Maps.
Just to let people know where it is. It doesn't have to be to scale, just usually they want the nearest two intersecting street names. But I think the important thing here is we don't want to include any geometry for the project. That all belongs over here in model space. For instance, if I see this and I think, and I'm out here in paperspace and I might just draw some lines up there to fix that. You'll still find that endpoint and that endpoint. But then when I say move that viewport, those don't go along with it. You don't put toilets in here, you don't do windows, no geometry of the project itself at all.
To see how this all starts to work together.
So here's a PDF of a set. On the front page, I've got basement and first floor plans showing existing plus demolition, a bunch of general notes, demolition notes, a map, north arrow, and some zoning information, just all typed in. Then on the next sheet, on layout 2, and you can rename them too. So the layouts can be A101, A102, A103, however you want that. On this, we have the proposed new construction. This has been through a couple of revision levels. So that's what these are indicating. There's a change here from what was there in the previous version. Just pay attention. Here then is a 1/2 inch plan of the kitchen, that's really what we were working on. And this is where the dimensions end up going. There's no point in having dimensions out in that quarter scale plan, and then elevations with dimensions and schedules, and then lighting and ceiling plan and electrical plan. So, and what we're starting to show here is the electricians don't want to see the framing dimensions. They don't need to see them. If I want to give the electrician very specific dimensions, like I need this to be exactly 2'9" off that corner, so it fits between something other and something other else, I would do that dimension for the electrician on the electrician's plan. The carpenter doesn't need to know where that goes, and the electrician doesn't need to know where the framing goes. And then elevations, and all these are on separate sheets. Some details. So all this was drawn. All these were drafted over in model space, and then there's a window for each one that just gets copied and then lined up. Views of the kitchen. Oh, I think I've got, as long as we're at it. In Revit, once you build a 3D model, you can generate a panorama that basically places the camera somewhere in the space and then turns around like this and looks up and down. You can't move through the space with this, but it's just part of Revit to do that kind of a view. It looks just like this, I have to say. They haven't put in a light fixture yet. They haven't, but really apart from the light fixture, and they got a different hood for the stove. We painted that room, but I would put a new door in. This some friends over in the Highlands. This room had been 2 weird rooms and a little porch, which I think it started out as one big room, and then somebody did some really cutting up weird stuff in the 1940s, judging by the age of the kitchen cabinets, and then we just opened it all back up again. And they love it, I must say. Anyway, so this is the space that I on Blackboard is the file. It actually is the 2D plan of this space, just to have a sense of it's a real thing. I would suggest not sort of getting inside these and trying to do any significant sort of drafting. It's just easier to go back over here where you see everything and you don't have all that extra stuff around the edges. Fillet radius 0. And of course that now shows up move. Okay, the reason it's not grabbing out there is this window is still active. AutoCAD thinks the cursor is still working inside this window. I have to click out here to come back and be able to select these views to move them around. And obviously all the geometry updates because it's just the 2 cameras aimed at the same thing. 50. Actually, let's take a little break now, like 5 minutes, and come back and we will use the drawing that's in course content week 5 called House Plan for Plotted Layouts, which is the floor plan of that kitchen that we can see how all that works in. This actually is how Revit exports its 3D model to 2D flat CAD drawings. And I did a couple of things. I added in the wall hatches and stuff. So what I like to do here, we can make more layouts, but I like to think of each of these sheets as going to someone with a different involvement in the project. And it's appropriate that some people see some things and other people's don't. So let's say, let's do this first. Let's go over to layout 1. And who's the most important person in the job? The client is the most important person in the job. So how are we going to put the whole view here for the client? What do we do? Either what's the command or what's the MV. MV, will that just do it all by itself? Yeah, MV. Let's make it big to start with because we don't know how big it really needs to be. Let's see how big we can get it on the screen for the client. So we'll select that viewport. And our standard scale custom means we just scale it to fit. We got no idea how big it is. Let's make it 1/4 inch and see where we get. Be nice to have it for 1/2 inch for the client. Let's see if that'll fit. Standard scale, 1/2 inch. Maybe, just maybe, if we drag things around, I'm going to sort of crop this right down to the house. I think that'll fit. And then to move it over, once you get it sort of cropped, and move that whole thing around. A 1/2 inch equals a foot will just fit, as it turns out.
The blue rectangle with the drawing number attached to it is
basically telling us for an enlarged view, go to drawing 1 on page A102 or whatever that is. One thing I always forget to do is once I've got it set up, is to check the check that the scale is right, and then to lock it like right away. Otherwise, you're going to zoom in and zoom out and sort of have to go through all this again. So locked, yes. There are a couple of things here that we don't really want to show the client. We don't want to confuse the client. So we're just going to show them like let's just call this a furniture plan. So eventually we go down here and put a sheet number and furniture plan, but we'll get to that at some point.
So we want to turn off some of these layers in this viewport.
So I'm going to double click inside there to make that active. We don't want to erase the stuff. We just want to turn it off in this view. If, let's say we pick the furniture layer. If you turn your layers property manager on, or drag it out, or whatever you do from the Mac, and we go to iFern. Okay, let's see that. We got a couple of things we can do here. One is just to turn it off. Looks good, but turning it off turns it off everywhere, including back in model space.
On the model tab.
Furniture is turned off. So we don't want to do that. I'll turn this back. I'll go back here. I'm going to turn it back on again. Same way, if I freeze it,
that locks objects on that layer in place
and turns it off. But again, if I go back here, that's all turned off here as well. Don't want that. What we actually want here is this furniture. Is this one that is called Viewport freeze, which means freeze that layer only in this one active viewport. So the furniture goes away. Actually, we're going to leave it on, but it's still on back here. So there are a bunch of ways to play with these to control what you want to have visible without ever having to, erase or move or anything like that.
Or affect the whole drawing, including all the other viewports.
So we've locked the viewport
so it can't zoom or pan.
Turned off the furniture. Actually, I want to turn the furniture back on to see it. But I guess what we don't want to show the client here necessarily are like these little telling us where the interior elevations are going to be. Maybe this is an early stage of it, and we haven't even drawn that stuff yet. So to freeze, it's a pain to have to pick something and see what layer it's on, and then go over here. The fastest way is right here, lay freeze, and then you can just pick the things you don't want, and their layer goes away. So let's just see how that works. So those all went away. The elevation markers, I think they're still on back here in model space. Model space. Model space, come on. Yeah, so they're still on here, but we have turned them off only in the view for the client, just in that one active viewport.
Freezing a layer from the ribbon which is the easiest way to do it, changes its status in the Layer Manager, which is the easiest way to keep track of what you've done.
G annotation, yeah, G annotation symbols, and that layer has been frozen in this one viewport.
The G layer prefix stands for general. So to repeat,
this guy up here, this freeze right here, freezes it in this one, in whatever viewport is active. Freeze is global, affects all the viewports and model space, and viewport freeze is just a freeze one viewport. So for the client, we're going to turn off this box. It's called a call out. It will then take you to another drawing. We'll turn off the door numbers. We'll turn off the window tags. They want to know, this is only showing electrical of new outlet locations, not of existing ones. So we'll leave those so they know where they're going to be. I think that's enough. Might have to, oh, it seems you have to escape out of that. It's looking for another object to pick, and you have to escape to terminate the command. At this point, since we've gotten rid of that blue box, I can move my move this over a little bit, center it up. And then it's going to be a little cleaner and easier to deal with if those edges move in as well. Last thing I'll do is select that and put it on the depth points layer. So it grays out and won't plot. Revit has a feature where any object can be locked in place, so it can't move. If you got a bunch of columns you don't want to move, you can just lock them in place. AutoCAD doesn't have anything like that, so you have to figure that everything that you're working with is still,
unless it's on a locked layer,
potentially movable. Like when you're moving one thing, you have to make sure you haven't picked others or like that. Okay, so there's the client's one. Let's do one for the carpenter and put some dimensions on it, just to see how that works. So we'll go to layout, layout 2, MV, view. Oh, you know, it turned out that they ended up not building this closet over here. They decided they'd rather have the master bedroom stay large. So the wife uses this closet and the husband comes down and uses this one. He's been doing it for 30 years, so it's no big deal. So let's provide the carpenter dimensions just within this rectangle. So let's scale this up so that that fits on the page. I'm going to drag this down and then change my scale to standard scale to, so you can sort of preview how these go. Let's say 1 inch equals a foot, which is very generous, and see if we can fit the whole kitchen plan on the sheet. So this is really going to be the view that blue outline is
referring us to.
I made it an inch equals a foot just because it'll fit just for. So that's pretty much where I'm. Let's see if it does fit. Well, yeah. Well, that's where you sort of, yeah. I don't really need a staircase, so I think we can. Crop into there. The trick here is having to switch back and forth between the two spaces. And right now, if we just stay here and we can just click out here for paperspace. Why can't I drag that guy? Oh, that's the
sheet border.
Yeah, I'll just cut halfway up the staircase. Oops. And also it helps to turn object snaps off, because otherwise it's going to end up snapping to stuff you might not want it to snap to. I'm trying to get this so I can just fit this door all the way in, and it looks like I can just do that. And I might have to move these. Here's something that happens a bunch when you're moving sheets, is that to get everything to fit and look the way you want, sometimes you end up needing having to move things in model space so that they will then fit into the viewport that you have available for them. So I got the door. So in this case, to see how it works, I need to move this B and the hexagon that indicates what window type this is. If I go back into model, if I go back onto my model tab, I really won't be able to see this line. So to do that, I'm going to click inside here to activate this window. Oh, shoot. I didn't lock it. Control-Z. Lock it, lock it, lock it, lock it, lock it. What did I tell you? I told you I didn't lock them. I always forgot to lock them. Display locked. Yes. So I can go into here and move this to fit. So there's some tweaking to do to get all these to. This is very close. Anyway, something like that. We already know from the first sheet what these rooms are. We don't need to have the room names here. They're going to be getting in the way of dimensions anyhow. So I think I'll VP freeze the room names, the elevation callouts, the blue line again, and the furniture, because the carpenter doesn't want to know where the furniture is. So that's this one, freezes the layer of selected objects. We'll get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of the furniture. He needs to know what the door numbers are. He needs to know what the window types are, so we'll leave that. I think I'll leave the electrical on just, well, let's take that off. Let's turn off the electric. He doesn't need to know there's a stove there. Sink we'll leave just for reference. Actually, you know, the carpenter doesn't need to know where this stuff is. I'm just talking through my head here. This is what the carpenter is responsible for building is the walls. So I think I would do something like that. There's a closet rods, yeah. Closet rod and a shelf. Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, this one has a closet rod and a shelf. This one just has a closet rod. So there's something, and the carpenter's gonna be responsible for that. So I think we should leave those. Yeah, frankly, I think with the text and dimensioning, since we're going to deal with all that Wednesday, let's just save this drawing, and we'll come back to it Wednesday. But you can see how we could do something similar for anybody else involved in the trade, like the lighting guy. We just save this, call it a ceiling plan, turn off the doors, put some circles and rectangles in the ceiling, and call it a lighting plan. So I'm going to save this. And I'm going to call it Okay, so this is the idea of separating things in a drawing by trade, essentially, by what member of the design or construction team needs to see what information. Let's start a new drawing.
Using the Art 559 template I gave you.
And then we'll use this to do construction phases, existing, demolition, and new, combined in different ways to be different on the screen.
And I'll start this new construction phases drawing, which is going to be based on the template that's currently opened as construction phases.dwg.
So the only way AutoCAD has in a drawing for organizing information is by layer name. And up till now, we've been doing like A, wall, and G, NO, and these sorts these in alphabetical order. And that's how you turn things on and off, and you have to sort of know what the code is to know what you're dealing with. I mentioned earlier on that when we're doing, let's say, a renovation where we need to separately be able to control existing walls that remain, walls that are getting demolished, and then new walls, we need to do something else with layer names to set that up so we can turn them on and off separately from each other. And the general way to do this, each of these will be a wall and then existing, demo, and new. So a wall existing, a wall demo, and a wall new.
It can get a bit much on some projects, having 3 phases for each of many of the basic layers in a drawing. So starting out organized and staying that way becomes quite important.
First of all, we're going to need some layers with names that will accommodate this. So let's just take the A wall layer and rename to A wall dash existing, EXG. And sometimes it'll be EXIS, and they'll always start with EX.
A student asked if renaming layers in this drawing would have any effect on the layers in other drawings. They are
completely separate. Each AutoCAD drawing is its own little universe. So to make a wall demo, we can just right-click that one and where's new layer? New layer. And that just comes right in underneath the one I had my cursor on. So this will be a wall demo. And right now they're the same color. We'll change that. And right click, new layer, a wall new. And I regret to say AutoCAD doesn't have any way to sort these layer names by, let me have all the new ones and then all the existing ones and all the demo ones. It's just straight alphabetical working left to right. So just keeping up with this, let's leave existing as that same brown. Let's change the demo to red. And the new to blue, just because that's what we did already. I'll make it brighter on the screen. I left the existing, the brown that it was, and changed the demo to red and the new to blue, sort of generically color coding it. So let's just do our 20 by 30 foot house again. And I want to do this on the existing wall layer. Obviously, if we do on the wrong layer, we can just pick things and change them in properties, but it's easier to start here. A wall existing, I'll do a rectangle. Click here, and I'm saying at 30 feet, comma, 20 feet. Oh, enter, 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 not escape. At 30 feet, comma, 20 feet, enter. Okay, there we go.
Now we'll offset that polyline a foot. In or out, doesn't matter.
And then let's do, well, I tell you,
let's draw all the interior walls as existing.
These 2 rooms, and then see what we need to do to those lines to kick them over into the demo layer. But because when you're going around, when you're measuring your apartment, for instance, you weren't thinking ahead, what do I have to demolish? You're just doing what's there. So we'll start with that and then manipulate the drawing, the entities from there on out. And I'm not too concerned about how they hit at the bottom. Make them long enough so we can either extend or trim them. Okay, so with something like this,
I'm suggesting you keep track of the phases with layers in a single drawing because separate drawings, separate AutoCAD files for existing, demolition, and new can simply get out of sync all too easily. So for this, it's really easiest to have a single drawing with two separate viewports that each show different phases of the project.
So basically need to take these two guys up here. A couple things I need to do. This line I can select and just put it right over onto the demo layer. So instead of a wall existing, it'll be on a wall demo. That's good. Well, this next guy is a little problematic because we need to, right now that's one line of one color. We need to end up being two lines of two different colors. So I think what I would do, I would extend this one all the way across. I mean, a couple of different ways to do this. Let's just look at this. Extend that guy. And then I don't know if we did the command called break. It should be under modify. You know, I need to drag this up here where we can see it. Seems like every time I get on this computer, it's set up differently. Blame it on the computer. Okay, so we can see stuff a little better. There's that. I saw one thing. There's two different breaks. I want this one. Oh, break at point. Anyway, easier just to click the icon, and you say select the object, and then indicate the point itself. And I'm going to turn F3 on, O-snaps on, to be able to pick that point exactly. So now I have two separate objects broken right there. Okay, so now we can use MA for match properties. Pick the source object, and then pick as many others as you want. The red is a wall demo. And I want to do all these color changes by layer, not by coloring the object. And then let's go to the new wall layer and draw the new one across. Now here's a nice object snap. If I'm drawing from here over to there and object snaps are turned on, it wants to snap down there or somewhere in here. I could click in here and then use trim to get rid of it, but really I would just like to be able to snap just perpendicular to that wall, wherever it happens to be. So I can do shift right click and bring up the temporary one-time only object snap and say perpendicular, and then grab that. Control shift brings that up for just that one time, and then we can copy that down some distance. Let's see what this looks like out on a title block. And let's figure we're just going to put them both, put both views out here, existing and demo, and then new construction. MV. I'm going to try to put two side by side. So I'm going to make this one go about halfway over, and then we'll try to find a scale that will approximately fit that viewport.
A student says she thinks the grid looks confusing.
I agree. I'm just trying to remember how to do that. I think to do that, we have to double click inside that view, and then down here, turn off the grid, which is also F7. We'll toggle you back and forth. So let's see what size that works out to be, what scale that'll be. Double click out here, select that viewport. Let's see what it is at 1/4 inch, just starting point. Let's do it at ½ inch equals a foot. This ended up being a ½ inch. Now you notice since a wall new layer we were using to draw the new wall, it's still the current layer as we drew that viewport, and it's not really that's not where we want that to be. Let's put that back on def points. So it goes gray and sort of tucks out of the way a little bit. And I don't know if these will stack better side by side or up or down. We can just copy the viewport like any other thing. Copy. Looks like side by side is not going to quite make it. Might do it like that. And as you can see, these can overlap without any deleterious effects. So let's try to set up the basic paradigm of what we're trying to do here, which is to turn the new wall off in this view. So I'm sort of going from left to right. So I'm just going to double click in there, make that active, and then use the layer freeze tool to select that and make it go away. Oh, and it says layer A wall new is current. I mean, that's the one we're drawing on. That's usually not a layer you want to freeze, because then if you start drawing stuff, nothing will show up. It'll just sort of be in the freezer instead of like where you can see it. So we'll say, no, I'll go back and just make layer 0 be current. And then I can go back and freeze this. There's some real stage management going on, as you can sort of see, of who appears when and how we control that. By the same token, down here in the, so this is the existing and demo, this is the new, we don't want these guys. So I'll do the same thing for them. Double click inside this viewport, go to freeze, and get rid of demo there. So with this, we got a little cleanup that needs to be done. Basically, there's two things I want to do. Three things. I want to change this line type to a hidden line type, a dashed line type, to really, since this is going to be printed in black and white on the job site, we need to make that really stand out as like demolition. I want to close up this hole. Think about the best way to do that, just with the lines available, and then indicate that this is a new wall. I like to crosshatch that to really call attention to it. So it's always a problem of what to do in this kind of a situation. You know, I don't want it to show up. I don't really want that to show up either, but I could put that little line on this new wall layer. Let's try that. It's all going to plot the same, but that way I don't have this odd little line down here, the odd little line up here to sort of confuse people. Maybe that's the way to do it. It's a little weird having just a piece hanging out there all by itself, but you know, that does represent where something new is going to have to be done, and replaster the wall there or something. I just put that on the new wall layer. In actual fact, you'd have a little note on the plan. It would be remove studs, provide new finish flush with existing, or something like that. And having that there as a separate color would help remind the drafter that they've got to do something there. I would say it's there are probably a couple different ways you could do it. Let's see if we can change that wall type, make this look like it's hidden. That would be under, let's go to the demo layer, and let's change its line type. Line type. Let's see which ones are here in your drawing. I don't even know. I would just go down to hidden, start with hidden, and see if it works. Yeah. Confuse things even more, so we're not going to do it. A layer can have its own regular color here, and also a color override for this viewport, but we're just not going to do that. We're just, if it's red here, it's red there. And then let's hatch this blue wall down here. Double click inside that view, or actually, let's go back to model space and do that. It could be either place. If I'm going to the A wall pat layer, that's the wall patterns. And often that's similar to the wall itself in terms of color, but a thinner line once we get around to doing it. So I'm on the pattern layer, home, pretty major thing, a drawing hatch is what I want here. And we'll start out with whatever it gives us. This is where it's important to have all your lines at least crossing. Basically, AutoCAD is going to take the point that you pick and then just start filling until it hits lines. And if you're not closed here, it's just going to try to fill the whole universe with lines, and we'll say I can't do that. So put down any old hatch you want to start with. It's a little aggressive to do it this way. Solid, just be this heavy black line. So usually you might just use this angled hatch pattern and then set it scale up to maybe 12 or something to get a hatched line. I'm going to change my layer color.
Yes, we would freeze that layer in the demo viewport.
Oh, current layer, we'll go back to 0. You can scroll through these to see things. This is how convoluted AutoCAD has had to get to be able to do stuff. One of the controls you can put in for a layer is whether that layer is frozen in new viewports, so that if you create new viewports, it doesn't, all this stuff, extra stuff doesn't keep showing up in them. I have rarely had so many layers that I've needed to use that. But it's there if, for instance, if we make a new viewport, all these layers are going to be turned on in it. If we didn't want them all turned on, we could tell them to freeze in new viewports. Let's say the demo one, and it would then not show up. If we're making like a ceiling plan or something or other.
Our first exercise dealt with
layers organized by recipient, really, client, electrician, carpenter. And this one is arranged by phase. And then in the real world, you need to have both of those happening. You want to be able to show the client existing and proposed. You want to be able to show the electrician existing and proposed. So we end up doing these plus these. One is as few layers as possible. It gets to be just a management issue. It feels like every single light switch is on a different layer because one's existing and one's posed. A lot of times it might be that if you had a light switch here and a light switch here and a light switch here, and that this was an existing one, and these were new, you might just end up having a note saying existing and then whatever fixture it went to, so that you didn't have to have a whole separate plan. I think that's got me for today.